Hi everyone, my name is Basement Creations, but you can call me Jacob. And what I'm holding here today is an aluminium profile that measures exactly 2.5 meters. And that's pretty long. But you know what else is pretty long? That's right, RQ4B Global Hawk Drone Wingspan. This autonomous plane is almost 40 meters wide, which is, well, a lot. It's also jet-powered, which is very unique for a drone. So, the goal of today's video is to build a scaled-down version of the real Global Hawk, and I'm going to do it using this aluminium profile as a main wing spar. So, let's get started.
Alright, so first, let's take a closer look at our drone. Northrop Grumman RQ4B Global Hawk is an unarmed surveillance and reconnaissance plane. And as the name suggests, it has a global flying range of whopping 22,000 kilometers. It also can reach an altitude of 18,000 meters and it can stay in the air for over 33 hours. And that's really impressive. At this point, it's basically a very low orbit spy satellite. But how exactly can it achieve such an efficient flight performance? Well, the first clue that is clearly visible is its very high aspect ratio wing. In general, long and narrow wings produce more lift, are very stable and have reduced drag, which makes them ideal for endurance planes like for example gliders. Global Hawk also has a V-tail which further increases the efficiency by reducing the wetted surface area. And because of no pilot inside, the fuselage design can be sleek and streamlined. Speaking of design, here is what I did to recreate the real aircraft in Fusion 360. First, I downloaded a few blueprints and inserted them as a canvas. I made sure to scale them down to fit the size of our aluminium wing spar. Next, based on those drawings, it was easy to create a simplified body shape, which after a lot of work and time turned into this final version. As you can see, I intend to build the wing using multiple airfoil shaped ribs. Now the actual Global Hawk airfoil looks like this, but after some research I found out that scaling it down 16 times might result in poor performance. So instead I designed the wing using old and trusty Clark Y airfoil. Now, because of the tapered leading edge wing design, going from the center each rib is getting progressively scaled down. Unfortunately for that to work, I can't use the whole aluminium spar. It has to be cut short to around 1.4 meters and then extended by smaller carbon tubes. Also, here on the top, I designed a special mount for 64mm EDF to act as a turbofan engine from the real plane. But here is a catch. Turbofan engines are pretty efficient, especially at high altitudes. So when I bought this EDF, I expected it to be efficient as well. However, it turns out that those electric jets are consuming a lot of power for relatively low thrust. So according to this datasheet, to maximize the battery life, we will have to run the EDF at a low voltage and decrease thrust. But at least it looks cool. Back to the plane, the whole fuselage is designed to be made from 5mm XPS foam, and all the ribs as well as V-tail and some wing spar sections are meant to be cut from lightweight balsa wood. All those materials are soft enough to be cut with a simple knife, but doing it by hand would be an excruciating job. Luckily, I recently received a great device that can quickly cut all those parts for me. And I'm talking of course about the Creality Falcon 2 laser cutter. In my recent review I tested its powerful 22 watts laser on a bunch of random stuff and it did a terrific job. But I didn't really make anything practical. So for this project I want to try new plane building techniques that are only possible with such a machine. So let's get to work. First we have to import our parts into the Lightburn software. But doing so can be a bit tricky since Fusion 360 doesn't support SVG export. But to our aid comes this amazing plugin called Shaper Utilities, which can generate SVG file of any flat surface you pick. Now we can easily import the file and choose the right placement. Then by clicking Frame, the laser will mark the cutting area, so that we can properly place the balsa or foam underneath. Now, cutting new materials is always a bit of a challenge, since you have to find optimal speed and power parameters by yourself. On my first try with 8mm balsa, I set the speed way too low and it actually made the wood catch fire. So on the second attempt, just to be safe, I lowered the power and it didn't cut all the way through. In such cases you can always do another pass by starting the same file again, but the fastest method is always to cut with just one pass. So after a few tries, I managed to find the sweet spot where the laser makes clean cuts but doesn't burn any excess material. And with those settings I proceed to cut all the wooden parts. As you can see, Falcon 2 did a great job here, even with the smallest parts. And the benefit of using balsa wood instead of, let's say, 3D printed plastic is huge, since the wooden parts are over 6 times lighter while still remaining quite durable, so they are perfect for building planes or even drones. Now how about cutting some foam? Here I started with making a proper material test. And as we can see, 600 mm per minute at 10% of power seems to be the right choice. So with those settings loaded up, let's proceed with cutting the hull of our Global Hawk. And once again, Falcon 2 did an excellent job. I don't think I would be able to cut all those shapes myself, but doing so with laser is just so fast and easy. Also, by placing the foam diagonally, I was able to cut parts longer than half a meter, which means the whole fuselage could be divided in just 2 segments. Alright, so now when we have all those beautiful parts cut out, let's actually build this plane. Well, that was a lot of hard work. But now when the paint on both fuselage and wing is drying up, let's quickly talk about the electronics. To control the plane, I'm using my favorite Maytag flight controller, with the newest Ardupilot software on board. And to provide wireless communication, I'm using not one, but two Express LRS radio modules. One of them is just standard RC receiver, while the other one works as Mavlink telemetry unit. Such configuration is incredibly useful, since now I can see all the sensors data on my tablet, and I can also change parameters on the go without the need of USB cable. This Express LRS telemetry option is actually a pretty new thing, so if you'd like to see a tutorial about setting it up, let me know down in the comments. Additionally, I'm also using one of those new fancy M10 GPS modules. It is very tiny, it is very lightweight, and it even manages to fit a quality compass inside. I somehow managed to fit all those parts inside the nose of the plane, but I will admit it's a bit cramped in here. Also, by moving the battery front or back, we can precisely balance the whole aircraft. When fully assembled, our Global Hawk has 4 control surfaces and 1 main motor, and of course, in order to work, they all need to be correctly defined in Ardupilot software. The setup for this plane was basically the same as in my last aircraft, so check that video out for more details. The settings that change are mostly in the servo output tab. Here the V-tail servos have to be defined as V-tail right and V-tail left. You may also notice that instead of right and left wing ailerons, I defined something called Flaperons. And that's a special Ardupilot function that combines both flaps and ailerons into one control surface. When active, it should increase the total wing lift and thus make takeoffs and landing easier for the pilot. And to control it, you simply need to define one of your radio switches as flap. Now when the plane seems to be fully operational, let's pack it up and do some flying.
Alright, so this is our Global Hawk, and as you can see, the weather today is absolutely amazing. There is no wind, and now before the start I have to perform some safety checks. First of all, I have to calibrate the compass, so I can do this from my telemetry setup right here. Now we need to check if all the control surfaces in the V-tail and also in our flaperons work right. So our V-tail controls the pitch axis and the yaw axis. So if we pitch it down, both surfaces go down as they're supposed to, and if we pitch up, they go up. So that's all right. And now if we yaw to the right, they both move right, and if we yaw to the left, they both move left, so that's good. And with the flaperons, roll to the right, right aileron moves up, left goes down, and the opposite if we roll to the left. Okay, so it seems that our control surfaces are fine. We also have the flaperon option, so let's see if flaps will work, and they do. Okay, so switch, flaps down, switch, flaps up. And also when we have our flaps down, the Ardupilot can still control the roll, like that, so it's really cool setting. Alright guys, so I think it's time to fly. It won't get any better. It's kinda cold out here, so let's get it going. Flaps down. No, not in camera! God damn it. Once more. It's not going to be so easy. God damn it. It doesn't want to start. Why don't you want to start?
Taking off indeed turned out to be not so easy. The foam sled I designed to help with getting up to the right speed on the snow is somehow causing the whole plane to turn on its own. And because the V-tail is not placed behind the motor, it starts getting effective only at high speeds, which means I couldn't command the plane to turn in the opposite direction. Many takeoff attempts were made that day, but none of them were successful. So then my dad suggested doing the hand launch, which didn't go well. But don't worry, Global Hawk survived, and after a few days of upgrading the plane, I was back on the same field again.
Alright guys, so we are now back at the field. The weather today is slightly worse, we have a bit of a wind, but it should be fine. We still have snow, and that's most important because this plane now has skis. I mean, look at this. There are 3 of them, 2 under the wings and 1 on the fuselage. And as you can see, they use rubbers to stay in level, and also they have some kind of a blade underneath which will help it to move straight, and it won't turn as well. It won't turn as much, rather, and I hope they will work. What else? We also have bigger V-tail control surfaces. I 3D printed those parts to give it more pitch authority and also to make it turn better at low speeds. And the most important change that we have, at least I think, is that I added a counterweight at the back. It's basically just heavy nuts and bolts which can be unscrewed, and they are here to balance the center of gravity, because last time I think it was very nose heavy and that's why it couldn't take off. So now with this counterweight it should be perfectly balanced and it should have much easier time simply taking off. So those were the 3 main problems and they should be fixed now.
Unfortunately, that day the snow started to melt and all those upgrades added a few hundred grams to the plane. All of that combined caused the small skis to dig into the snow, which drastically slowed the plane down. Also, I must have glued one of them askew, since the plane was turning left all of the time. It quickly became apparent that the Global Hawk was again not going to take off. So as a last resort, my dad came up with an ingenious idea. Well, at least we tried. Surprisingly, the plane survived, but it needs a few fuselage fixes before the next fly attempt. So sadly, it's not going to fly in this video. I'm sorry. But don't worry, I won't abandon this project. It was way too much work and it looks way too good to be just forgotten about. I just need some time to develop better ways of taking off. It was also my first time building a jet plane, so it's possible it has some airframe problems, which might for example mess with the airflow. Or I might have messed something entirely different. I believe some of you guys watching this video have much more experience than me in those topics, so I would be very grateful for any advice in the comments. But for now, thank you very much for watching, thanks Creality for sending me the Falcon 2, it will be very useful for future projects and in fixing this one as well. And well, see you all soon, bye!